Rustaceans, sorry to interrupt, but here's a short prelude to the conversation you're about to hear. Within the accessibility niche, Matt and Arnold are known as the main developers of AccessKit, and Matt is also known as the designer of Linux's next-generation accessibility protocol, Newton. With AccessKit, Matt Campbell and Arnold Loubriat took on the ambitious task of abstracting over the accessibility APIs of several target OSs and offer one unified way for toolkit providers to make their UIs accessible. The three of us have in common we contribute to accessibility in Rust. The conversation was recorded at Rust Week with a small but engaged audience in Utrecht, the Netherlands. Thank you to the Rust Week organizers who, even on short notice, were happy to accommodate us and graciously provide us with the necessary equipment and a friendly technician. Now, without further ado, AccessKit with Matt Campbell and Arnold Loubriat. This is a very, very special episode of Rustacean Station, so if you're hearing this in your car or at home or wherever you are, we succeeded in offering this to the people of Rustacean Station. With me are two very special guests. Matt, hi.
Hello.
And Arnold Loubriat.
Hello.
Hello. And my name is Luc van der Duim. And we all three have something to do with Rust software and accessibility. Can you two tell me, Matt, what are you working on?
So Arnold and I are the two main developers of AccessKit, which is a GUI accessibility library for Rust.
What does it offer?
Right. So it offers GUI toolkits, a cross-platform abstraction over the various platform accessibility APIs, so that GUI toolkits can much more easily provide the information that is required by assistive technologies such as screen readers, screen magnifiers, and some others.
And who would use AccessKit?
AccessKit would be used by GUI toolkits such as eGUI, Slint, Xylem, and various other GUI toolkits that are written in Rust, and also now GUI toolkits written in other languages because we have language bindings.
Such as?
C and Python so far.
Wow. And so the Python is with Py3o?
Py03, yes.
Py03, yeah, sorry. And C is, how is that constructed?
We manually implemented a C-compatible ABI, and we're using cbindgen to generate the header file.
Ah, okay. And the most interesting, I think, about AccessKit, when I thought about it, is you have all these accessibility protocols of the underlying platforms, or the platforms you're targeting, but you have to somehow unify those. How did you go about that?
I went about it by basically adapting Chromium's internal cross-platform accessibility abstraction. I studied what they were doing and I liked it a lot, so I decided that we were going to implement something very similar. And specifically, what I liked about the way that Chromium implements accessibility is that it's what I call a push model, where instead of relying heavily on callbacks to traverse the accessibility tree and query properties on it, which is what the platform accessibility APIs are doing. In Chromium's case, the browser rendering engine, or in our case, the GUI toolkit, creates a tree update data structure and sends it to AccessKit, and then AccessKit retains a tree in memory, and then the various platform backends can query that cross-platform accessibility tree structure to implement the platform APIs.
Does that mean how would that work? What's the API AccessKit is offering the toolkits?
Right. So first of all, the toolkit creates a struct called tree update, and it adds one or more nodes to the tree, and each node has an ID, a role, and some properties. and then if you're providing the initial update for the tree, then the tree update struct also includes a tree field, which is an option field containing a global a data structure with global information about the tree, like the ID of the root node. That's the main thing that has. And then the AccessKit, the platform backend has a couple of ways of delivering that tree update. There is a callback that the backend can call when it needs the initial tree update, so that the accessibility tree can be lazily initialized only when there's an assistive technology that is actually using it. And then for subsequent updates, the toolkit can call a function on the platform adapter to basically send that tree update to the adapter. So basically for updates after the initial one, you send the tree update to the platform adapter at the same time that you're drawing a frame in the visual UI. So it should be conceptually familiar to toolkit developers who aren't already specialists in the way that native GUI accessibility has historically been done.
Which is, I think, a very reasonable assumption, because who is specialized in accessibility?
Pretty much only the assistive technology developers and like the browser engine developers.
Yeah, right. So maybe we should, in that respect, do one step back and explain what's the tree.
Right. So it's a hierarchy of nodes that convey the content and structure of the user interface. So if you're at all familiar with the document object model, or DOM, from the web platform, then it's conceptually similar. Each node has an ID, a role, some properties. Wait, I already said that. Plus, optionally, some child nodes, and then you can have nested nodes. So a role would be things like window or button or text input or label, checkbox, things like that.
Yeah. Okay, and a role would be things like that, and properties.
So, for instance, a label. So one property is value, which can be like the text content of a node. So for a node with a role of label, the value would be the label itself. For a node with a role of text input, then the value would be the text inside of that text edit control. And then another super common property that most nodes have is the bounding rectangle, and that's used for things like some screen readers draw like a highlight rectangle around whichever node has the current accessibility focus, and then that allows a screen magnifier to track which part of the screen should be magnified based on where the user is currently working.
Okay, and Arnold, how long have you been involved with building AccessKit?
Well, I think it was in 2021, I think a couple months after Matt started the project.
That's right.
So when did it start?
I started, I registered the domain name and created the GitHub repo in June 2021, and around June or July, I started translating the Chromium accessibility abstraction into Rust, just very preliminary work on the project, and then Arnold came into it in August.
How did you find out about it, Arnold?
So I had this same idea of building a foundational library to help implementing accessibility for UI toolkits. So I was helping around in the Rust crates ecosystem, adding missing parts that we would need to do such a library. And then I think it's somewhere on a GitHub issue that I realized that someone else was doing the same thing as me, and I think it's how it started, because I quickly realized that I had way less experience doing such a thing, and that it was ultimately better to just join. And I think that's how it started for me.
Yeah. I remember a little bit more about how you discovered that I was doing the same thing.
Oh, please elaborate.
Yes. So Arnold had submitted a pull request to the WinAPI project, the WinAPI crate. This was what everybody was using for like Win32 API stuff before the rise of Windows RS, which was directly from Microsoft. And Arnold submitted a pull request with some work on implementing either Microsoft Active Accessibility, which was the old Windows Accessibility API, or UI Automation, which is the current one, or maybe both.
I think I did both.
Yeah.
And it was like more than 6,000 lines of code. Oh. And I want to add that COVID-19 quarantine was hard. Because I was so bored.
Yeah, so I started reviewing the code because I figured this was what I was going to be using to eventually do something like AccessKit, and I found some kind of bug in it, and I posted a comment on the PR, and that was how Arnold discovered that I was doing something related to accessibility in Rust. And then when Windows RS did come around, I also posted a comment on the pull request, which was then in progress, which was going to allow us to implement COM, component object model interfaces, which was a key part of what we needed to do for AccessKit on Windows. So Arnold saw those two things and put two and two together and realized that I was doing something in this space.
So ultimately my work was useless, but...
Well, it allowed us to find each other, so it wasn't wasted.
Wow, so you wrote 6,000 lines in order to find each other.
Yeah, I think maybe even more, and it was all manual work, very tedious. So,
and then Windows RS ended up doing it like,
the proper way,
generating metadata from the SDK header files, and then generating Rust code from the metadata.
Yeah. So Matt, you were well equipped to judge that code, because you have a history in Windows accessibility code, if I'm correct.
Yes. So I wrote a third-party Windows screen reader starting back in 2004. This was for a company called Serotek, Serotek, which no longer exists. If you go look it up, it's going to
so we can gossip.
Well, if you go look it up, it's going to redirect to the current company that the founder of Serotek and I started more recently. But all of that to say, I developed a third-party Windows screen reader, and then in 2017 I went to Microsoft and joined the Windows accessibility team, where I worked on Narrator and the UI automation core infrastructure from the inside. And I was there for 3.5 years, and part of the origin story of AccessKit was that while I was there at Microsoft, I got connected via Microsoft's yearly company-wide hackathon, and particularly their Hack for Good program, where they work with nonprofits and educational organizations and things of that sort. I got connected with a team that had their own GUI toolkit as part of. It's a programming language called Quorum, and they're not going to mind if I talk about them here. And so Quorum is a programming language that's like designed to be really easy to use for beginners, and it's used a lot in like computer science education at the high school level. And they have their own compiler and their own GUI toolkit and their own integrated development environment. And because they have their own GUI toolkit, they were working on making it accessible, specifically by implementing UI automation on Windows, and they needed some help with their UI automation implementation. Actually, they needed a lot of help, as they themselves would agree. And so, kind of serendipitously, fortunately, by accident, I got connected with them at the right time, and I helped them with their UI automation implementation, and that was part of what showed me just how difficult it is for a GUI toolkit developer who isn't already a specialist in accessibility to get this right. And so after I left Microsoft, I decided I wanted to do something about that.
Okay, and so what were the challenges at that time?
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge was that they didn't have even Microsoft's own sample code, which used to be provided as part of like the old Windows SDK, was not pointing them in the right direction to start with a real world implementation in the GUI toolkit, because the sample code that Microsoft provided, it showed how to implement a single control in its own window that implemented UI automation, but it didn't show how to implement a full tree the proper way. So they had ended up like creating lots of dummy child window handles just to implement the accessibility for their controls. And the other problem was that their real top level window handle, the one that was like handling input and being rendered to, that was using the implementation of that Win32 window class wasn't directly under their control.
Who is they in this
they
context?
is the developers of the Quorum GUI toolkit. And so, and they didn't know the esoteric Win32 trick to like hack around to inject an accessibility implementation into that existing window class. And I did know the trick. And when I implemented that for them, it like blew their minds, because I knew the specific technique is called window subclassing, and it's something that Win32 experts have been doing for decades, and I happened to know about it. And so that, combined with just my knowledge of how to correctly implement multiple UI automation elements in a tree with the proper implementation of like the fragment and fragment root interfaces, and it's all like very esoteric, and it's something that we try to hide away from the toolkit developers now in AccessKit. So you don't need to know about this stuff. That's the whole point.
Cool. So we don't need to know about it.
Yeah.
and which brings us, luckily, back to AccessKit and the development on AccessKit. Can I ask you, Arnold, what are you working on currently? What's for you the most important thing to get going?
Well, that's a very tricky question.
That's what I'm for.
Yeah, I think the things I want AccessKit to have right now are not necessarily the things I enjoy doing and that I want to do. But I think some very important pieces that we're missing are some proper test suites and good documentation. And as all developers can attest, that's usually not the work we like doing, but
no, and in this respect, it may be really hard.
Yeah.
Because you have all these platforms, and preferably you would like them to generate. You would like to check on all these different platforms if your implementation works correctly, right?
It is going to be a difficult problem.
Yeah.
It's going to be tedious, but I think it's necessary.
Okay.
Yeah, because I already did. Well, even back in 2021, I wrote an end-to-end test harness on Windows for like setting up a simple window and then connecting AccessKit to that window, and then creating a UI automation client object to like test that we're implementing UI automation correctly by like calling into it the way that a screen reader would. And I knew how to write that kind of test harness on Windows because we had done similar things I and my teammates on the Windows accessibility team had done similar things for some of our own tests internally in like narrator and UI automation. So I knew the gotchas and possible pitfalls with testing UI automation end to end like that. But I don't know how to do that, for example, with Mac OS accessibility or Android accessibility. And those are things that we're going to need to figure out if we want really robust tests.
So you're looking maybe for some Android developers to join on?
That would be nice.
And some Mac OS developers, perhaps?
Yeah, and possibly more help from developers familiar with ATSPI on Linux, such as yourself.
Oh, right. What can I do?
Help us write tests.
Right.
Right, Arnold?
Yeah.
Okay. We're listening, and took notice. Thanks for that. A heads up. You referred to that the inspiration for AccessKit came from Chromium, and which brings me to Newton. And what is Newton?
So Newton is the code name for a prototype new accessibility stack for GNOME and other free desktop environments on Linux or other Unix platforms. It aims to be native to Wayland and a replacement for ATSPI, the Assistive Technology Service Provider Interface, which was originally designed and implemented by Sun Microsystems for the GNOME project in like 2001. And the most distinctive thing about Newton in terms of architecture is that, as I might have mentioned, Chromium pushes accessibility tree updates from the sandboxed renderer process to the main unsandboxed browser process through their own serialization and IPC mechanism. What I did with Newton is to have the application push accessibility tree updates through the compositor all the way to the assistive technologies. So it completely eliminates the pull-based approach to accessibility, where you're doing individual queries to traverse the tree and fetch properties.
Pushes only, right?
Yes.
Only pushes, and the same concept applies for Newton as what you described with AccessKit. Like you get a full tree up front.
Mm-hmm.
And then from
then
on,
incremental updates.
Incremental updates, which means that the AT or the accessibility tool you're using, the screen reader, for instance, gets to interpret what kind of the semantics of the change.
Yes, and we expect most assistive technologies to use the code that we're already providing in AccessKit to do that interpreting. But if you as an assistive technology developer want to access the tree update at a more raw level, then you can.
You've already written the translations.
Yes, yes. If you look at the there was a crate called Newton ATSPI compat as part of the prototype implementation. That it's a library that runs inside the assistive technology, such as Orca, and right. It receives the tree updates from the application. I mean, the composite. all the compositor does is it keeps track of which assistive technologies are interested in tree updates, and it basically passes the file descriptor through from the containing the latest tree update through from the application to the AT. So the AT receives the tree update from the application via the compositor,
which makes the transfer really cheap.
Yeah.
Because essentially you're passing something akin to a pointer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Basically. So the AT receives this tree update, and then using some code that we already wrote for AccessKit, does basically a diff between the nodes that were updated and the corresponding nodes in the existing tree to figure out what changed and which events need to be fired. And then it can provide an ATSPI-like API within the screen reader process completely using an in-memory copy of the tree. So there's no IPC overhead. And as someone who has worked with ATSPI and the Odelia screen reader, I'm sure that's something that you're familiar with.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with the screen reader itself and I mostly do when I feel like it work on ATSPI.
Ah, okay.
So I'm mostly concerned with are we doing the stuff that we do fast enough, and are we doing the things that we do correctly, and which holes should we plug before accidents happen, and so that's what I'm concerned with, and I find fun to do. And Newton, but I'm not on a Wayland platform currently. Is Newton accepted and enabled at this moment?
It's strictly for applications that are running natively on Wayland. And so far, I've only implemented the compositor side of it in Mutter, which is the GNOME compositor.
Yeah.
But I would certainly be open to having it implement and certainly want to have it implemented in more compositors such as Kwin and Cosmic Comp, which is the compositor from the Cosmic desktop environment, and Sway and WL Roots if they want to.
Why wouldn't they?
Yeah. I mean, well, the only possible objection that I anticipate is that the application side of the protocol between the applications and the compositor is a Wayland protocol extension, because that's the obvious way to do it, and that automatically works with applications using sandboxed technologies such as Flatpak. But the protocol between the assistive technology and the compositor, so the AT can connect and register its interest in receiving tree updates and get events from the compositor, that is a D-Bus based protocol. Mm-hmm. And I did that as basically because I didn't want to fight with the Mutter team about the way that they preferred to do it. And I knew that they preferred to use D-Bus for sort of privileged interfaces like that are used by system components and not just regular applications. So the WL Roots people probably wouldn't like introducing D-Bus into their lean and mean Wayland compositors.
So that's where, and I read the document where you announced Newton. That's where your warning about politics came from.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's.
I was being funded by the GNOME Foundation, so I decided I was just going to do it the GNOME way.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm what I might end up doing if I end up and I just don't have time to work on to do more work on Newton right now, mm-hmm. because of the work that I'm doing on both AccessKit and unrelated projects.
Yeah.
But if and when I pick Newton back up, what I might do is I might extend that that client library that the ATs use that I talked a little bit about earlier to support both D-Bus and Wayland protocols.
Oh, that would be awesome.
For connecting from the AT to the compositors. So I might just,
the only thing we're looking for is a sponsor to sponsor you to do that. Or is there an employer who has a say in this?
Oh, I mean, the Newton is effectively. I'm sure that there are people involved with GNOME who would have who would be interested in somebody continuing work on Newton, whether it's me or someone else. But I don't think they have funding for that at the moment. So as far as I'm aware, at the moment, Newton is my project to continue as I see fit, when I see fit.
Okay.
But
I got a signal that we have to round up, so let's point people to where they can find you guys. Arnold?
I'm on GitHub, of course. I'm on Mastodon. Over there, my handle is DataTriny, DataTriny. I'm on LinkedIn for the professional people, and I think that's all for me.
I'm on GitHub as MW Campbell. That's CAMPBELL. And the AccessKit website is accesskit.dev.
Okay. My name is Luc van der Duim, and that's also the GitHub handle, so you can find me there should you want to contact me. And then I'd like to shout out the Odilia project and the screen reader. We can always use help, our funding, if you'd like to, or if you insist on doing so. And otherwise, I would like to thank the Rust Week organizers for making this possible and making this happen with their awesome audio system, and the audience that is still here and not too bored. Thank you all, and goodbye.